أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله نور السماوات والأرض، مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح، المصباح في زجاجة، الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية، يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار، نور على نور، يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. صدق الله العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
The lamp is past. Family and Ismaili leaders gather at Villa Barakat in Switzerland to remember their beloved 48th Imam and prepare to introduce the 49th hereditary Imam to the worldwide Jamaat. As the mantle fell on his young shoulders, the spotlight of publicity fell with it, not always accurately.
80,000 Ismaili Muslims, representing a community of 20 million spread all over the world, gather in a very colourful assembly in the National Stadium at Karachi to install their new leader, the young Aga Khan, 49th Imam. The ceremonial sword of justice is carried past the watching crowds as the 21-year-old Prince Karim, Aga Khan IV, makes his way to the dais. Alone, he mounts the steps to the throne, a college boy, little known to the public, till the surprise decision made by the old Aga Khan made him the spiritual leader of millions. The presentation of the Holy Quran opens the installation ceremony. The new Aga Khan puts on the robe worn by his grandfather, and thus symbolically assumes the mantle of authority borne for so long by that much-loved man. In the few months since Karim succeeded to the title, the world has recognized the wisdom of the old Aga's decision to pass over his two sons and nominate a young and progressive leader to this unique office.
Progressive, but very much in tune with his 1400-year heritage, as Mawlana Hazar Imam showed on one of his very first visits to to the land of his boyhood, Kenya.
The years of development and change which lie ahead are certain to throw up many new problems. We should not be afraid of these. You will surely surmount them if you stand by your faith and meet your difficulties in the spirit of humility and tolerance which our religion demands of us. This is especially important for the younger generations who will have to carry the future on their shoulders. Only the faith of your fathers can sustain you and enable you to live in peace here in this world and in the next.
Faith in the midst of change was to be one of the fourth Aga Khan's major themes for the next half-century. Hazar Imam set about getting to know world leaders and renewing ties begun by his grandfather. And visiting his Jamaat. People of one faith but very different cultures and living conditions. Everywhere, vast fields of the faithful gathered to greet their new Hazar Imam. He travelled hundreds of thousands of kilometres, but there were places he did not go. Because 50 years ago, the East-West confrontation called the Cold War hung like a dark cloud over both East and West. There were Ismailis on both sides of that divide, in 24 countries, but those in the West were out of contact with the millions in China and the old Soviet Union. And now the spiritual life, safety and social welfare of all of us were his responsibility. From childhood, Shah Karim had known he was descended from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that his life would be linked to his lineage. And while in many cultures, the notion that peoples and nations have a duty to those less fortunate was a 20th century innovation, for Hazar Imam, that duty was laid down in the Quran.
Islam is an all-encompassing faith, and it gives direction to every aspect of man's life. It urges the individual to lead a balanced life, one that strives to accommodate both material progress and spiritual well-being. But no man, woman or child can hope to achieve this balance in sickness, illiteracy or squalor.
Hazar Imam was young, yes, but his grandfather had begun his Imamat at the age of 8. Building on the lives of his forebears, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah strove not only for the betterment of Muslim communities, but for human welfare and dignity everywhere. He pioneered a modern family tradition of international service. He served as president of the League of Nations, forerunner of the UN, and assembled the beginnings of a worldwide humanitarian team. But education was the cornerstone of his work. Preparing for the challenges ahead, the 49th Imam returned to Harvard University, where he balanced academic life with active pursuit of sports. Mawlana Hazar Imam played soccer for Harvard, and in 1964 captained Iran's ski team in the Winter Olympics. Hazar Imam would go on to continue another family tradition. In the words of his grandfather, "Naturally my heirs will be riders of horses. That is in the blood. The horse and rider have been the sign manual of my race for 1,000 years." Today, Hazar Imam is a well-known judge and breeder of thoroughbreds. In 1959, the Imam student sportsman graduated from Harvard with an honours degree in Islamic history. But at that time, few imagined the history that was about to be made.
In 1957, I was still a student at Harvard when I inherited the responsibilities of the Ismaili Imamat from my grandfather, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah. It seemed inconceivable then that there would ever be substantial communities in the West. The Ismailis were too deeply rooted in their ancestral homes, indeed frozen there by the Cold War in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa.
That was about to change profoundly. In the first years of his Imamat, Mawlana Hazar Imam saw European rule lifted from most of Africa. Old leaders went, new leaders came. Painful transitions were felt in many countries where the Jamaat lived. Hazar Imam took the lead. He got to know the new post-colonial leaders, Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta, in Uganda, Milton Obote, and Tanzania's new leader, Julius Nyerere. Getting in step with the new world that independence ushered in. One of the Imamat's first tools for post-colonial development was Industrial Promotion Services, IPS. It invested in countries that many investors would shun. Here's a project where all sides were winners. A jute bag factory in Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa. An early product of IPS venture capital. Ismailis from East Pakistan used their expertise to help set up the project. The Ivorians learnt about new technologies, about how to help themselves. A key part of Hazar Imam's development strategy. In later years, such efforts to foster enterprise and sustainable economic development would multiply. Under new agencies like the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development, ACFED.
The approach of the Imamat has always been to respond to the development challenges and priorities of the countries in which it is engaged. Naturally, these priorities differ significantly from one country to another, and from one region to another. It has often meant taking courageous but calculated steps to create opportunity in environments that are fragile and complex at the same time. For ACFED, this has frequently meant giving a lead where others might have feared to tread.
It was seldom easy. In 1971, Idi Amin seized power in Uganda. Taking a long-term view, Hazar Imam continued with his development projects and inaugurated the IPS building in Kampala. But 6 months later, the Ugandan leader turned on his Asian population and forced the departure of some 50,000 people, including Ismailis who had lived in Uganda for generations. They fled with what they could carry and sometimes had that stolen on the way out.
It was really, really awful. I remember the anguish that people didn't believe it, first of all. It was something that they found difficult to accept. This must be some sort of a bad joke, but it turned out to be very real. And so people began actually to leave. First those who were not citizens, and then later on people who were actually citizens of the country, felt they had no choice but to leave.
In the same era, Burma expelled tens of thousands of Muslims who initially found refuge in Pakistan. But soon the war between East and West Pakistan in turn uprooted many more. Political changes in countries such as Tanzania and Mozambique also led minorities to emigrate to the West. While Ismailis have resided peacefully over the centuries in their ancestral lands, some migrations have occurred in a few periods of Ismaili history. Such dispersals had bolstered the Ismaili traditions of adaptation and self-reliance. The Imam's role, as always, was to guide the Jamaat, to interpret its tariqah, and to safeguard its traditions, values, and physical security. The Jamaat was able to turn adversity into opportunity and hope.
That means that the idea is not limited to either territory or to any particular period of time, that it's constantly being reinvented, it's constantly developing across time and across space. So for the Ismaili community, the notion that one's identity would be tied to any particular land is irrelevant, because the centrality of these Islamic values continues to inform it wherever it is.
The Fatimid dynasty, based in North Africa 1,000 years ago, created a haven for scholars and teachers from many races, cultures and regions. The Caliphate founded one of the world's first universities, Al-Azhar in Cairo. Towards the end of the Fatimid Caliphate, Ismailis began establishing a network of fortresses and settlements throughout Iran, later expanding to parts of Syria and Lebanon. Marvels of engineering and architecture. Despite the constant threat from Seljuks and Mongols, the Ismailis upheld the primacy of the intellect and their patronage of learning, benefiting Muslim as well as non-Muslim scholars and scientists. In the end, Alamut too was cast down, its human and intellectual wealth decimated, but its spirit far from broken. Less perceptible than before, Ismailis remained strong and cohesive. Committed to protect and support his Jamaat, Hazar Imam persuaded governments that victims of the post-colonial upheavals were worth taking in, and then helped settle these displaced communities in new lands.
I didn't feel that the Ismailis should be looked upon by any country that was going to receive them as a potentially weak, unstable minority that would bring more problems than it would bring advantages. And I was able to use Imamat institutional support with the banking network in Canada to provide specialized programs of support to the community in Canada, in Britain and elsewhere.
Mobina Jaffer, who fled Uganda in 1972, became a senator in Canada.
The world of volunteerism was ingrained in us. And when I went to Canada, I didn't have a job at first, and my book knowledge would not have got me very far. But the credo I learned about volunteerism helped me to get my first, my leg in the door to do some volunteer work, and then I was able to get a job.
In one of his first farmans to the newly arrived Jamaat in Canada, Hazar Imam urged Murids not to look back.
I would like my spiritual children to think of Canada as their homeland. Make it your homeland. Work for your homeland. Defend your homeland. And from here in the future.
The future meant helping each other and creating places to share their values with others. What Hazar Imam has called ambassadorial buildings, representing the Jamaat to the community at large. In 1985, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, opening the new Ismaili Centre in London, spoke of what it meant to Ismailis from Africa.
For them, leaving East Africa must have been a sad, deeply disturbing, and in some cases a terrible experience. But clearly the Ismaili community, who made Britain their new home, triumphed over these adversities and have found here a new sense of security and of belonging. And this centre is a powerful symbol of that feeling of belonging.
Not long after, a centre in Vancouver, Canada, designed to symbolise in stone a timeless tradition. Over the years, other centres have risen to serve the Jamaat and wider society in different parts of the world. In Lisbon, a building in whose courtyards memories of Andalusia, the Mughals, and the Maghreb converge. In Dubai, where a complex of Fatimid inspiration also houses an early childhood centre. In Dushanbe, in a setting where the poetry of Central Asia's mountains and rivers and that of its legendary scholars will continually echo. In Toronto, where a surrounding garden shared with the Aga Khan Museum will link the present to the past and bring serenity into an urban maze. In all of these, light and nature evoke the remembrance of Allah. Distinctive, yet in harmony with their surroundings, these Jamaat Khanas project outwards the reflections within.
A place of contemplation and search for enlightenment, where people come together to share knowledge and wisdom. It will be a place of peace, of order, of hope, and of brotherhood.
Meanwhile, to strengthen understanding of the Ismaili Tariqa and its various traditions, Imam Zaman founded the Institute of Ismaili Studies in London to educate and communicate, to develop scholars and teachers, to clarify, to translate, to catalogue what is known and research what is not, to preserve precious manuscripts, artifacts, books, and to share with the Jamaat and others the history and wealth of tradition at risk of being neglected and even distorted. But there was much more to do for the Jamaat and others.
There are those who enter the world in such poverty that they are deprived of both the means and the motivation to improve their lot. Unless these unfortunates can be touched with the spark which ignites the spirit of individual enterprise and determination, they will only sink back into renewed apathy, degradation, and despair. It is for us, who are more fortunate, to provide that spark.
The big question: how best to strike the spark? Hazar Imam now had to harness a truly worldwide Jamaat to meet the new challenges of a new age.
I think he decided to adapt what existed on the ground, the institutions that his grandfather had created, and to turn them into a global network where there was synergy, there was a possibility of good governance and a much broader reach.
Starting in the 1960s, Hazar Imam systematically added building blocks.
First, he wanted to establish the institutions so that each institution was solid, had a vision, and could carry on its own. And then the second phase of the activity, which was not always easy, was to bring the institutions together in a synergistic network.
The result is the Aga Khan Development Network, AKDN, designed to realize the social conscience of Islam through institutional action.
I don't know of any other network of that scope and that professionalism. It's a mixture of Islamic ethics on the one hand, good statesmanship on the other, because he opened the network to serve not only the Jamaat, but the other communities who lived around the Jamaat, which was an extremely important and wise judgment.
I've never met anybody who not only has the vision, but who has the personal management capacity to be able to take these visions and realize them. And I have to say that as someone who is a professional in this field, he has a wonderful way of doing it, which perhaps gives him an advantage over most of the rest of us. in that he draws on remarkable experts, but he makes the decisions.
In 1967, Hazar Imam created the social engine of the network, the Aga Khan Foundation. It undertakes projects in health, education, rural development, the environment, and strengthening civil society. The built environment was one of Hazar Imam's earliest concerns.
The visual, physical, and emotional impact of a decent home can light the spirit of human endeavor. A proper home can provide the bridge across that terrible gulf between utter poverty and the possibility of a better future. If a man is enabled to buy or rent a reasonable roof over his head, he will have been provided with the first vital ingredient of his self-respect.
For the Jamaat, this meant housing cooperatives, but also help with construction and clean water and sanitation. The search for betterment was combined with a reawakening of traditions of design, landscaping, craftsmanship, and building from across the Muslim world. Hazar Imam was already a patron of architecture when he instituted the world's largest prize in that field.
We were interested in architectural achievement, not just in design, but how good design could help improve the daily lives of the users and beneficiaries.
In the years since, he has made culture an important means of improving lives in other ways through reviving built heritage, musical traditions, and other art forms. Transforming spaces and lives has been central to the Imam's role. It looks like the very gateway to paradise. The tiny principality of Hunza in the mountains of northern Pakistan. But for all the beauty and abundance showing here, it was not always this way. When Hazar Imam first visited the region in 1960, Hunza's people remained isolated, deprived, and disconnected. The northern areas had, in the space of the subsequent 4 decades, been completely reinvigorated. Imamat agencies took an integrative approach, helping people, whatever their tariqah or tradition of Islam, with schools, health centres, water supply, sanitation, and livelihoods. Masjids, imam bargahs, and centuries-old forts were restored. Communities became self-reliant. Hazar Imam has often explained the key to self-reliance.
Both my grandfather, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah Aga Khan, who created the basic structure of the Aga Khan institutions, and I myself in building on that structure, have been deeply aware that education is the key to such widely ranging endeavors as creating a modern economy, as adapting the system of Islamic jurisprudence to present-day conditions, as improving the role and status of women in society, as creating a physical environment of buildings which are sympathetic to Islamic culture and tradition, Education is the key to all this and more.
Following his Diamond Jubilee, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah continued a pattern begun in the early 1900s and established a network of Diamond Jubilee or DJ schools. This was a pattern replicated in East Africa. Senator Jaffer went to Aga Khan schools in Uganda.
And I feel that was the best gift I got, is Aga Khan education. I tell people it was, I lost everything. We lost all our belongings, we had nothing. I didn't even have my certificates of education, but my education nobody could steal.
In East Africa, at the request of Muslim leaders, Hazar Imam also worked with them to expand the curricula of traditional madrasas and to introduce new methods of teaching. Madrasa students once struggled to enter primary schools. Today, students from these same madrasas are well prepared to win places at university. Educational institutions, as Mawlana Hazar Imam often pointed out, played defining roles in Muslim history.
And we have to remember, I think, that the greatest times in our history, in various parts of the world, were always linked to the existence of one or several great universities. Whether it was Al-Azhar, whether it was the University of Baghdad, whether it was the madrasas of Samarkand, Bukhara, there is no time in Islamic history where our society was not in its greatest times linked to a great intellectual center.
A flagship institution launched during Mawlana Hazar Imam's Silver Jubilee was the Aga Khan University. With teaching sites in 7 countries nearly 25 years later, AKU carried ancestral promise already at its founding. Among its greatest contributions, opportunity for women. In place of distant dreams, now there are role models, like AKU's Dr. Anita Zaidi, a graduate of the Aga Khan University.
What AKU did was give a lot of confidence to women about their role in the medical profession, about their role in society at large, and the confidence to succeed at a big level. And so you'll notice that the women graduates of both the medical college as well as the School of Nursing are very confident of themselves, they're assertive, they're bold, they have the drive and ambition that you need to succeed in very tough professions.
Now, a second university is underway, the University of Central Asia, with campuses in Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and the Kyrgyz Republic, specializing in the needs of high mountain societies and conquering terrain and distance with the latest technology. In 1986, with the Jamaat living all around the world, Hazar Imam implemented the first global constitution for all Ismailis wherever located. The Constitution underlines the duty of all Ismailis to make a valid and meaningful contribution to the improvement of the quality of life of the Ummah and the societies in which they live. The Constitution was updated in 1998 to formally include the concept of the Aga Khan Development Network, the AKDN, what it represents, what its purpose is, and how it interacts with the institutions of the Jamaat and wider society. For instance, the Constitution now included Focus Humanitarian Assistance, an international organization to assist people struck by natural and man-made disasters. Take this camp in Pakistan, run by Focus and the Jamaat, for thousands of Ismaili refugees from civil war in Afghanistan. In 1999, inspired by Hazar Imam's farmans, 15-year-old Qurban Ali Amiri told of his dreams.
I try a lot to study everything, every kind of books, every kind of newspaper, all the things I want to read and be in future a journalist.
Volunteer help for Qurban did not stop with the food bowl. This year, he got his degree in business administration from the American University of Central Asia in Bishkek, Kyrgyz Republic.
The knowledge that I got from Pakistan, the English courses that I got from Pakistan, the computer skills, the computer programs that I got, the help from Jamaat, Ismaili Jamaat in Pakistan, they really helped me to compete in today's, in today's school in here, and to get this scholarship and to graduate from this school. I showed that, if you facilitate, if you give me the opportunity, I'll make a difference. I'll get it. I'll make it.
Qurban's story is about the essence of our tradition of voluntary service.
The achievements of the AKDN would not be possible without the tireless contributions of the global community of Ismailis that I lead, residing in Central and South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and North America. Our volunteers and contributors also include many thousands of others from multiple cultures and faiths around the world.
A gracious reminder that for all Muslims, helping others is a mission, not for a lifetime, but for all time.
For the last 50 years, our planet has been frozen by a paralyzing bipolar political vortex, which we call the Cold War. During those years, many allowed their views to stagnate and harden into notions so dependable that they became unrevisable dogmas. My capitalism versus your communism. Your Eastern Bloc versus our Western Bloc. Left versus right. But like the Berlin Wall, our bipolar system was dismantled almost overnight, and with it the black and white world to which we had grown accustomed.
Some quiet statesmanship by Hazar Imam played a small part in those events. In 1985, he had lent his villa near Geneva for the first summit of US President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev's leadership finally led to the breakup of the Soviet Union. And with the Iron Curtain pulled back, hundreds of thousands of Central Asian Ismailis could finally connect with the wider world. An opportunity shackled to a challenge.
A massive brake on change has been released. The potential for creative action, creative encounters, is now much enhanced. This change is a work in progress, however. The potential of the moment must be seized, for conditions for change may not always be so propitious.
Hazar Imam was speaking about newly independent Tajikistan, still in the throes of civil war.
When Nasser Khisrau came to Badakhshan, he found that local people, their faith, it has connection, directly connection to natural environment. and it's water, stones, rivers, moon, sun, and he did not destroy it. He just changed from the faith to the tradition.
Renowned Ismaili filmmaker and member of the Supreme Soviet, Davlat Kodanazarov, explains how the Jamaat kept its faith alive throughout the communist era by successfully blending traditions with faith.
And I think this is a reason why during the Soviet time people kept strong their faith, because it was their love to their Imam, and during the everyday life they had communication with Imam all the time, from morning to evening, because it was part of their everyday agricultural activity.
The Soviet system that had lent prosperity to one of the world's poorest regions collapsed, and with it Badakhshan's food supply. Pro-communists fighting opposition forces plunged Tajikistan into civil war, worsening the situation. Then AKF stepped in with a food lifeline.
And I can tell you that if Aga Khan Foundation did not come, it was catastrophe. I can tell you that Aga Khan Foundation during the 5-6 years brought their food, and this is why people survived. If not, the half of population will die.
The conflict was eased, but still not formally resolved, when Mawlana Hazar Imam arrived in Tajikistan in 1995 for the first visit by an Imam in memory. At every stop, the Murids prepared their best welcome. They joyfully sang and danced. They walked for days and endured cold and rain.
شکم به مدتیم پنج قدر در غدان با گوش جان بشنو اسم یکی هزار.
Elders on behalf of the Jamaat presented Hazar Imam with local musical instruments.
I think it first of all means that by giving this instrument to the Imam, people assured the Imam that we have preserved this tradition through a difficult period, and we are happy and grateful for your presence. That was the symbolic expressions of their belief and their devotion to the Imam of the time.
And then, all too soon, the visit was over. But not the war. Three years later, he returned to find a land at peace. But now civil war was afflicting neighboring Afghanistan. Despite the dangers, thousands from the Jamaat of Afghan Badakhshan gathered to hear the Imam address them from across the river Panj in Tajikistan.
I have observed with great pain and sadness Muslims fighting against Muslims in Afghanistan. We are not allowed to live in hate. Absolutely, we must respect the sanctity of life. It is the Holy Quran itself which says, "And whoso saves a life, it is as if he had saved the entirety of mankind." These are the ethical premises on which we need to build to bring peace to Afghanistan, to eliminate hate and division, and thereafter rebuild the country for the benefit of all Afghans.
With Afghanistan still in turmoil, Hazar Imam set about building bridges, reconnecting Afghanistan. And soon, the Imamat was running hundreds of projects throughout the country.
I cannot believe that replacing a collapsed society and environment with mediocrity is the right way for a destroyed country to rebuild for its future. The other way is to see reconstruction as an opportunity to draw upon the world's state-of-the-art technologies and standards, using them to jumpstart the economy and to help bring it to a new and higher plane.
A flood of uncertainty after the attacks of September 2001 added urgency to Hazar Imam's deep hope for real understanding in the West about the Muslim world.
That the acts of September the 11th and all that is behind them are repugnant to the very spirit of Islam and to the beliefs and yearnings of the vast majority of Muslims around the world is beyond question. In the words of the Quran, it is as if the entirety of humankind had suffered a death with every life that was so brutally ended.
9/11 was widely called part of a clash of civilizations, but Hazar Imam spoke of a clash of ignorance. To meet the crisis of ignorance, Hazar Imam has redoubled his efforts, encouraging mutual understanding and cooperation amongst faiths.
Father, very nice to see you.
At a Syrian mulaqat, addressing tens of thousands from various traditions of Islam and other faiths, Hazar Imam was emphatic.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Any differences must be resolved through tolerance, through understanding, through compassion, through dialogue, through forgiveness, through generosity, all of which represent the ethics of Islam.
To instill these values in tomorrow's leaders, Hazar Imam has launched the Aga Khan Academies.
Say good morning, His Highness. Good morning, His Highness.
Please go on, I'm going to join the class.
18 boarding schools across Africa, South and Central Asia, and the Middle East. The first opened in Mombasa, Kenya in 2003. It takes promising boys and girls from all religious, cultural, and economic backgrounds.
The scholarship does make a huge difference, especially since I know that the award for next year depends on how I perform academically in class as well as in terms of physical activity and creativity. I know that I have to do this in order for me to get that scholarship. I have to show them that they gave me the scholarship for a reason, that I deserve it and I truly deserve it.
The Imamat has received global recognition. Formal protocols, decorations, agreements, and treaties have been signed with governments around the world.
So nice.
Hazar Imam's work and thought have garnered sincere appreciation.
His Highness the Aga Khan is a tireless humanist whose views and beliefs are employed for the service of people and in the true expression of humanity.
In helping us to bring hope and opportunity in regions of the world that have known too much despair.
By providing a beautiful and inspiring window into the Muslim world.
Know that when you speak, Canada and the world will listen.
In partnership with the Canadian government, the Imamat founded the Global Centre for Pluralism in Ottawa.
The Centre recognizes that we cannot make the world safe for democracy unless we also make the world safe for diversity.
Its mandate, creating and sharing knowledge and know-how about pluralist societies. Accepting an award for promoting tolerance, Hazar Imam emphasized hope.
Instead of shouting at one another, we must listen to one another and learn from one another. If our animosities are born out of fear, then confident generosity is born out of hope. Even in the poorest and most isolated communities, we have found that decades, if not centuries, of angry conflict can be turned around by giving people reasons to work together toward a better future. In other words, by giving them reasons to hope. And when hope takes root, then a new level of tolerance is possible, though it may have been unknown for years and years and years.
At the same time, Hazar Imam has left no doubt where he stands on extremism and its denial of the Islamic message of inclusiveness.
This message is still potent in the Muslim world today, although it is sometimes clouded, distorted, and deformed by political interests and by struggles for power over the minds and hearts of people. There are attempts at transforming what are meant to be fluid, progressive, open-ended, intellectually informed, and spiritually inspired traditions of thought into hardened, monolithic, absolutist, and obscurantist positions.
Hazar Imam has striven to show how new knowledge can preserve values and allow progress. In Mali, his call to revitalize the unique traditions embodied in the mosques at Timbuktu, Mopti, and Djenné echoed a more urgent challenge.
Aujourd'hui, nous sommes face à une situation délicate dans laquelle tous les musulmans de paix doivent s'unir pour présenter au monde le visage d'un islam de paix, d'unité, d'intelligence et de conviction.
In Cairo, a living declaration that Islam, not only the tombs of the pharaohs, illuminates Egypt's glorious history.
This process has been particularly satisfying for me from a very personal perspective. In our excavations and historical investigations, I constantly have been reminded that we were touching the very foundations of my ancestors, the Fatimids, and the pluralistic history and intellectual profile of this city and this country, to which they contributed so profoundly. I am very humbled by the opportunity to return to Cairo, founded over 1,000 years ago by the Fatimid Caliph Al-Mu'iz, to build on that history. 35 generations later, through the work done here by my institutions, it is my prayer that this park will be a continuing contribution to the people of this great city.
Helping to fill the gap, Al-Azhar Park, once a dump, now a testament helping all Muslims to value the diversity of their heritage. But the heritage that the Imam has sought to protect for the Jamaat for 50 years is a deeper and more essential one.
My beloved spiritual children, remain strong on Sirat al-Mustaqim. Remain regular in the practice of your faith. Remain united as one large family. Forsake bad habits. Educate yourselves throughout your lives. Remember that it is only the soul which is eternal in every human being, and therefore be regular in the practice of your faith. When you are in difficulty, in a worldly way for time or work, take your tasbih. Take your tasbih. Call Ya Allah, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali. Call the tasbih, because that in its own way is a prayer at that time.
Since the 11th of July 1957, all my aims and ambitions have been devoted to help and guide my spiritual children in spiritual and worldly matters. The happiness which I have gained from my work, the encouragement to carry more and more responsibility and undertake more and more projects, the continuous search for truth in all matters, all this has been due to you.